All right, so today we're going to talk about area of basic shapes, and with the goal of later being able to put those shapes together to make the composite figures, right? Like I said again, a composite figure is what 8.3 is really about is composite figures, which is just a combination of shapes. So if you think about when someone draws a house, right, like a little picture of a house, it's like a rectangle with a triangle on top. Well, we're going to be able to find the area of those. But in order to do those, we need to be able to find the area of the rectangle and the area of the triangle. So that's what we're going to work on today is kind of just those individual shapes. And then by tomorrow, we'll be able to put them all together. So let's start with the most kind of basic shape in terms of area, which is the rectangle. Rectangle and square, okay? So a rectangle or a square, they're done the same way. Obviously, the difference is a square has all the same sides, whereas a rectangle doesn't necessarily have all the same sides are equal. But they all have 4-sided figure with 90-degree angles. All right, so here's the formula for the area of a rectangle. Very simple formula. Area is equal to base times height, BH. Okay, area is equal to BH, where this means B stands for base and H stands for height. Okay, and if you want, you can put the time sign there. Remember, if you have two numbers right next to each other, that's multiplication. But if you want to put the times, you can as well. Okay, so B times H. That's it. That is the entire formula, base times height. All right. So let's go ahead and let's do some examples here. All right. Let's do one right here. We'll call this letter A. Here is a rectangle. And remember, this box that I'm putting here in the bottom left corner, that means 90 degrees. And that's the most important concept probably to making sure you don't make mistakes on these types of problems is understanding 90 degrees. A base and a height are always 90 degrees to each other. They're always perpendicular, right? Which means they meet at a 90-degree angle. Why is that important? Well, think about you and your height, right? Whenever you measure your height, right? Doesn't the doctor say stand up straight, right? Doesn't say lean over, doesn't say sit down, right? You stand up straight 90 degrees with the ground. The ground in you should be 90 degrees, and that's how you get your height. So let's do some examples here where we have, let's say this is 11 yards, which is my B. And let's say this is 8.7 yards, and we'll call that my H, okay? Now, make sure you have a calculator with you, right? I do not want you doing this by hand. Calculator, okay? All right, so very simple. Area is equal to base times height, which just means I'm going to do 11 times 8.7. 11 times 8.7. All right, and then I go ahead and I multiply that in my calculator. Go ahead and put that in. And I get 95.7. The units are yards. And remember, because it's area, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, area is always going to be squared. And that's it. Base times height. And again, you know something's a base and something's a height if they meet at 90 degrees. Okay. Now on the IXL, sometimes they give you the area and only one of the sides. You just need to be able to go backwards and divide, right? So for example, if I said on this problem, if I said, okay, I don't know how many yards that side is, but I know the area is 95.7. If I do 95.7 divided by 11, I'll get that 8.7 that I needed. Hopefully that makes sense. On the Excel, it just has you go backwards sometimes. So again, if I don't know what this is, let's just put H here. I could easily find it by saying, okay, well, 95.7 divided by 11 should give me H, which is 8.7, which would work out. Okay, so sometimes you have to go backwards, sometimes you have to go forward, depending. Okay, let's move on. The next shape that we need to do is very similar, which is a parallelogram. Parallelogram. Now, a rectangle is actually a kind of parallelogram. A parallelogram just means it has two sets of parallel lines. Okay, two sets of parallel lines. So those are lines that basically you can kind of think of them as being in the same direction. They have the same slope. They never touch each other if they went on forever. Okay, two sets of parallel lines. So the formula for the area of a parallelogram is simple. Area is equal to base times height. Exact same as the rectangle. Now, with a parallelogram, though, things get a little bit tricky. So let's try one here so you guys can see. Actually, let me make that a little bit fatter. All right. So here's a parallelogram. And let's say that this is 6 inches. And we'll say this is 4 inches. And just for fun here, let's say that this is 5 inches. Okay. So this is where things get a little bit tricky. The question is, which one's the base, which one's the height, and which one does not matter? All right. Well, the base is pretty simple. The base you can kind of think of as bottom, right? What the shape sits on, right? If you were to take the shape, cut it out, and put it on a side, you would put it on the base. Right. The base is the part that's the bottom or the shape rests on. So this one I can see is the base right here. That one's easy. Okay. So again, area is equal to base times height. So base is 6. So the question is, which one is the height? And again, the key is this. Look for the right angle. Look for the 90 degrees. Look for the box. I see that I have this box right here, which means the two numbers are the 6 and the 4. The 4 is the height. So what about the 5, Mr. Leong? The 5 doesn't matter. It's just there to throw you off. Right? Think of it this way. When you go and take your height, no one cares about your lean height. Right? Like no one says, hey, how tall are you? Oh, I'm about 5 feet tall. No. How tall are you when you're leaning over? Like no one says that, right? The height that matters is when you are standing straight up and down, which is why we use the 4 and not the 5. Does that make sense? Okay. Hopefully that makes sense that you use the 4 and you don't use the 5. So the correct answer here is just 6 times 4, which is 24 inches squared. Right? So very simple formula for rectangles and parallelograms. Base times height. The only thing that you need to kind of like focus on is making sure you're using the base and the height. The height, again, has to meet at 90 degrees. Meets at 90 degrees. Okay. So that's the big thing for rectangles and parallelograms. And you should be able to, once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to multiply these really, really quick in your calculators. Okay. So again, all it is base times height for rectangles and parallelograms.